What happens to a woman's body when she's constantly under pressure? When her mind never stops spinning, her heart races, and her body never feels safe enough to exhale? Can a woman truly feel desire when her nervous system is locked in survival mode? These are not just psychological questions. They are biological realities. When stress becomes chronic, the body shifts from connection to protection. Blood flow that should move toward the pelvis, the heart of arousal, is redirected toward the muscles and brain for defense. The body literally closes the door to pleasure because it believes it's not safe. What most people don't realize is that stress and arousal use the same pathways in the body, but they cannot coexist at the same time. Think about it. When your mind is racing, when you're bracing yourself to meet everyone's expectations, when your nervous system is stuck in overdrive, your body isn't thinking about pleasure. It's thinking about survival. Arousal requires safety. It requires softness, openness, blood flow, and trust. But stress sends the opposite message. It tells your body, you're not safe. You can't relax. You have to be on guard. And the moment your brain sends that signal, everything that supports desire begins to shut down. The heart rate quickens, but not in anticipation. It's in defense. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, digestion slows, and blood flow leaves the pelvis. The body begins to conserve rather than create. This isn't a psychological weakness. It's a biological design. The stress response, often called fight, flight, or freeze, evolved to protect us from danger. But in today's world, the danger isn't a tiger. It's a full calendar, emotional exhaustion, financial pressure, a phone that never stops buzzing. The body can't tell the difference. It reacts the same way. The sympathetic nervous system, the accelerator, stays on, and the parasympathetic system, the brake, the part responsible for rest, digestion, and yes, sexual arousal, stays off. So when a woman says, "I just don't feel turned on anymore," she's not broken. She's not frigid. She's stressed. Her body is doing exactly what it's been trained to do: protect her. The tragedy is that she interprets this as failure, when in truth, it's the body's wisdom trying to keep her safe. The female arousal response is deeply tied to the body's sense of safety. When the nervous system feels calm, the brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, and nitric oxide, chemicals that enhance blood flow, sensitivity, and connection. But when the brain senses threat, it releases cortisol and adrenaline instead, which constrict blood vessels and suppress those very hormones that create desire. It's like trying to light a fire in the middle of a storm. The flame can't take hold when the wind of anxiety is blowing through your body. This is why so many women report feeling numb or disconnected during times of high stress. It's not that their libido disappeared, it's that the signal can't get through. The body has blocked the channels that lead to pleasure. This numbing is both emotional and physical. The skin becomes less responsive, the breath shorter, the ability to stay present fades. You can't feel turned on when you're barely able to feel at all. And here's something even more profound. Chronic stress reshapes the brain itself. Studies have shown that prolonged exposure to cortisol actually reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for emotional regulation and connection, and increases reactivity in the amygdala, the fear center. So not only is your body on edge, but your mind is more likely to interpret neutral situations as threatening. You might pull away from a partner's touch, not because you don't want it, but because your body doesn't know how to trust it. Over time, this disconnection becomes habitual. The nervous system learns to stay tense. The body forgets how to soften. Even moments of rest feel restless because the inner alarm never fully turns off. And when you live in that constant alert state, pleasure becomes foreign territory. You may crave closeness, yet the moment someone gets near, your system braces instead of opens. It's like wanting to swim but being afraid of the water. The good news, the hope, is that the nervous system is not fixed. It's adaptable, plastic, resilient. Just as chronic stress can train it to shut down arousal, intentional relaxation, mindfulness, and emotional safety can retrain it to awaken again. Healing begins with awareness. You can't change what you don't feel, and you can't feel what you don't slow down for. The body needs permission to relax, and that permission must come from within. It starts with noticing the signs of tension: the clenched jaw, the tight shoulders, the shallow breath. These are signals that your body is in defense mode. And then comes the act of release, breathing deeper, lengthening the exhale, grounding your feet on the floor, letting your shoulders drop. When the body feels grounded, the nervous system gets the message. It's safe to shift. That shift, known as parasympathetic activation, is the gateway to arousal. It's the body saying, you can rest now, you can receive, you can feel. In that state, the heart opens, the pelvic floor softens, and blood begins to flow where it was once restricted. Touch feels different. Time slows. Presence returns. You see, arousal isn't something you force. It's something you allow. And the more you chase it under stress, the further it moves away. The key is to stop trying to control it and start creating conditions for it to naturally arise. Those conditions are safety, trust, rest, and connection. Without them, the body will always choose survival over sensation. Many women have spent years ignoring their body's needs, pushing through fatigue, numbing discomfort with caffeine or distraction, and wondering why their libido has vanished. But the truth is, the body doesn't forget how to feel. It just needs to be reminded that it's safe to do so. The more a woman begins to slow down, breathe, and reconnect with her own body, not for performance, but for presence, the more her natural desire returns. There's also a deep emotional layer to this. Chronic stress doesn't just tighten the muscles, it hardens the heart, it creates emotional armor. And while that armor may have been necessary once, to survive trauma, disappointment, or over-responsibility, it also blocks the flow of intimacy. Pleasure thrives on vulnerability, but stress builds walls against it. Healing requires softening those walls, one breath, one moment of honesty at a time. Books like The Body Keeps the Score remind us that the body carries every story we've lived, every tension we've held, every emotion we've suppressed. The body remembers even when the mind wants to forget. So, to restore arousal, we must first restore communication between the body and the mind. We must listen to what the body has been saying all along. I'm tired. I'm scared. I need rest. Once we begin to honor those messages, something profound happens. The body starts to trust again. It realizes it no longer needs to guard itself so tightly. And as that trust deepens, sensitivity returns. Sensation returns. Desire returns. Not as a performance, but as a pulse of life moving through you. The process of unwinding chronic stress isn't quick, but it's transformative. It involves more than just self-care routines. It's about shifting the entire relationship you have with your body. Instead of seeing your body as something to manage, you begin to see it as something to listen to collaborate with. Pleasure then becomes a language of connection, not escape. Touch, too, changes meaning. When you touch your own body with awareness, noticing its warmth, its texture, its breath, you send signals of safety to your brain. The vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the heart and the pelvis, begins to hum with calm. This is the same nerve that governs arousal, intimacy, and emotional connection. It thrives when you slow down. It's not about doing more. It's about feeling more. So often, women are told to try harder when they feel disconnected, to spice things up, to fix it with effort. But effort is the problem. You can't force arousal from a stressed state any more than you can grow flowers in frozen soil. What you need is warmth, patience, and nourishment. That nourishment might look like turning off the phone, taking a slow walk, or giving yourself permission to rest without guilt. It might mean saying no more often, or asking for help instead of holding everything together. It might mean reconnecting with your breath, with your body, with nature. These are not luxuries. They are acts of nervous system repair. Every time you pause and breathe, you lower cortisol. Every time you feel gratitude or receive affection, you raise oxytocin. Every time you rest without apologizing, you tell your body, you are safe. And every time you feel safe, the pathways of arousal reopen a little more. This is the hidden truth behind female desire. It is not about being more sexual. It's about being more alive. And aliveness cannot bloom under stress. It blooms in presence, in connection, in stillness. When you begin to honor your need for rest, your pleasure will return not as an act of will, but as a natural rhythm. So the next time you wonder where your desire has gone, Don't look for it in effort. Look for it in stillness, in your breath, in the quiet moments when your body feels safe enough to feel again. That is where arousal begins, not in the body alone, but in the space where the body finally remembers that it's okay to be alive. And when that happens, when stress loosens its grip and the body begins to trust again, you don't just reclaim pleasure. You reclaim your vitality, your creativity, your sense of being. Because a woman who feels safe enough to feel is a woman who is truly alive. Shame is one of the most powerful forces shaping a woman's relationship with her body, her pleasure, and her sense of self-worth. It begins quietly, often before she even understands what it means to feel desire. It comes in glances, in tone, in unspoken rules. Good girls don't do that. Don't dress like that. Don't be too much. And little by little, she learns to separate from the very part of herself that feels most alive. When a woman feels shame about her sensuality, she's taught to view her body as an object to control rather than a source of wisdom to honor. She learns to monitor, to shrink, to hide. Pleasure becomes something secret or dangerous, not sacred. And over time, that shame doesn't just affect her mind. It lives in her body, tightening her muscles, restricting her breath, numbing her sensitivity. She becomes split, outwardly composed, inwardly disconnected. Shame has a way of whispering lies so convincingly that they sound like truth. It tells her she is either too much or not enough, too sexual or too cold, too emotional or too detached. It convinces her that her worth depends on how others perceive her, rather than how deeply she feels her own being. And in doing so, shame severs the connection between her sensuality and her self-esteem. When you feel ashamed of your natural impulses, you begin to distrust yourself. You question your desires, your boundaries, your needs. You silence your own voice because you've learned that expression leads to judgment. But repression doesn't erase desire. It only buries it deeper, where it festers into self-doubt and fear. The tragedy of shame is that it takes what is most life-giving and turns it into a source of pain. The same energy that fuels creativity, love, and connection is redirected inward, becoming self-criticism and guilt. The woman who could move through the world with grace and confidence instead learns to police herself, to dim her own light. We see this everywhere, in the way women apologize for taking up space, in the way they dress for safety rather than expression, in how they disconnect from their bodies during intimacy, because they're too busy judging themselves from the outside. Instead of feeling, they're performing. Instead of being present, they're managing perception. Books like Women Who Run with the Wolves remind us that a woman's sensuality is not just about sexuality. It's about her instinctual, creative embodied life force. It's her connection to her intuition, her rhythm, her inner knowing. Shame cuts her off from that wild intelligence. It tames her spirit until she forgets that she ever had one. This disconnection is not just personal, it's cultural. For centuries, women's pleasure has been feared, controlled, and silenced. A woman in touch with her sensuality is powerful. She is harder to manipulate, harder to shame, harder to silence. And so, society has long linked female desire with danger or sin. But what's truly dangerous is a world that teaches women to be ashamed of their own bodies. When a woman internalizes that message, she doesn't just lose touch with her sensuality. She loses touch with her power. Because sensuality is the language of embodiment. It's how you feel alive in your skin. It's how you know what you want, what you love, what feels right for you. Without that connection, you're easily pulled away from your truth. You start living for approval instead of alignment. Shame thrives in secrecy. It grows in the shadows of silence and comparison. It tells a woman that she's alone in her struggle, that everyone else is doing it better, that she's the only one who feels this way. But the moment she speaks her truth, the moment she says, "I feel disconnected, I feel numb, I want to feel again," the spell begins to break. Because shame cannot survive being spoken. The healing of shame starts with curiosity, not condemnation. Instead of judging the parts of yourself that feel hidden or heavy, you begin to ask, when did I first learn to feel ashamed of my body? Whose voice told me it was wrong to want? When did I stop trusting myself? These questions open the door to understanding, and understanding opens the door to compassion. Compassion is the antidote to shame. It's the soft gaze that says, you did nothing wrong for wanting to feel. When a woman begins to replace judgment with compassion, her body begins to soften. Her breath deepens. Her energy starts to flow again. She stops apologizing for her existence and starts celebrating it. In therapy rooms, in women's circles, and in the quiet moments of reflection, this transformation happens every day. A woman touches her own skin without rushing. She looks at herself in the mirror not to critique, but to see. She speaks her desires aloud, even if her voice trembles. And something inside her shifts. The old shame begins to dissolve, replaced by awe, a deep recognition that her body is not something to control, but something to honor. Physiologically, this matters. Shame triggers the same stress response as fear. The body tightens, the heart rate rises, blood flow leaves the core. The pelvic muscles contract. The very sensations that could lead to pleasure become suppressed by the body's attempt to protect itself. So, when a woman carries chronic shame, she's not just emotionally blocked, she's physiologically restricted. Her body is guarding her from herself. When she begins to release that shame, the nervous system relaxes. The body's natural rhythms, arousal, orgasm, creativity, intuition, start to return. The flow of blood, energy, and emotion becomes freer. This isn't just a sexual awakening. It's a spiritual one. It's the return of self-trust, the restoration of wholeness. But this journey is rarely linear. Shame has deep roots. It shows up in subtle ways. In the hesitation before saying what you really want. In the tension in your jaw when you try to receive pleasure. In the feeling that you have to earn rest or affection. The work of healing shame is the work of reclaiming innocence. The ability to experience your body without judgment. To see your sensuality as natural and sacred. There's a story that says Eve's sin was knowledge, that she desired to know. But what if her desire wasn't rebellion, but curiosity? What if the shame that followed was the real fall, the separation from our own embodied wisdom? When women return to their sensuality, they are not becoming sinful. They are becoming whole again. Shame disconnects women from their self-worth because it tells them that their value is conditional. It ties worth to purity, performance, beauty, or approval. But true worth is not earned, it's inherent. It lives in the body, in breath, in being. And when a woman begins to feel that truth again, shame loses its grip. Self-worth grows through embodiment. The more you inhabit your body, the more you trust its sensations, the more you realize you are not broken. You are human. You are cyclical, changing, alive. You begin to see your sensuality not as something to be tamed, but as a compass, pointing you toward what nourishes you. Many women discover this through movement, dance, yoga, walking, touch. The body remembers what the mind has forgotten. Through movement, the old stories of shame begin to release. Tears come, laughter comes, breath returns. It's as if the body sighs in relief, finally allowed to be home again. When a woman feels connected to her sensuality, her self-worth rises naturally. She no longer looks for validation outside herself because she feels the truth of her value in her own skin. Her posture changes, her eyes brighten, her presence deepens. She moves through the world with quiet confidence, not because she's trying to prove anything, but because she's no longer at war with herself. This inner reclamation affects every area of life. Relationships become more authentic because she can express what she truly wants and needs. Work becomes more fulfilling because she's guided by intuition rather than obligation. Even creativity expands because shame no longer censors her imagination. To move beyond shame, women must rewrite the script they inherited. Instead of "my body is a problem," it becomes "my body is my guide." Instead of "desire is dangerous," it becomes "desire is divine." Instead of "I am too much," it becomes "I am enough, exactly as I am." This reprogramming doesn't happen in one moment. It happens every time she chooses honesty over hiding, compassion over criticism, curiosity over control. Healing shame is not about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were exiled by it. It's remembering that your sensuality is not separate from your humanity. It is the pulse of life within you. When that truth lands, everything changes. Imagine a world where girls grow up learning that their bodies are wise, that pleasure is sacred, that self-worth is not negotiable. Imagine what would happen if women no longer felt ashamed of wanting, of feeling, of being seen. That world would be more alive, more compassionate, more connected. Because when women heal their shame, they heal the collective disconnection that has silenced generations. And so, this is the invitation. To come home to your body, to replace shame with reverence, to see your sensuality not as a secret, but as your birthright. Every breath, every sensation, every moment of awareness is a chance to return to yourself. When a woman no longer feels ashamed of her sensuality, she begins to move differently, not just in her body but in her life. She stops apologizing for existing. She stops asking for permission to feel. She becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to be, but because she's fully herself. That is the power of a woman who has made peace with her body, who has forgiven herself for being human, and who has reclaimed the sacred truth that she was never meant to be ashamed of her own aliveness. Silence is one of the most subtle yet powerful forces that erode connection. It doesn't shout or accuse, it simply withholds. It builds invisible walls between people, brick by brick, moment by moment, until the distance feels too wide to cross. When silence takes root, understanding fades. And when understanding fades, intimacy dies. Not always in a dramatic rupture, but in a quiet drifting apart. For women, silence often begins as self-protection. Maybe she tried to express herself once and was dismissed, mocked, or misunderstood. Maybe she learned early on that it's safer to stay quiet than to risk conflict or rejection. Maybe she was told her feelings were too much, her questions inappropriate, her body language too suggestive. So she learns to hold her truth inside. She swallows her words, her desires, her pain, and carries them in her body like unspoken prayers. But the body keeps the score. Every time she stays silent when she wants to speak, her throat tightens. Every time she pretends she's fine when she's not, her chest constricts. Every time she hides her needs, her muscles tense. This internal holding pattern becomes physical, manifesting as tension, fatigue, or numbness. The very energy that should flow freely through her body becomes trapped, and with it, her capacity for connection. Silence feeds misunderstanding because it creates space for assumption. When one person withholds their truth, the other fills in the blanks with guesses, fears, or projections. A partner might interpret quiet as disinterest, withdrawal as rejection, or emotional distance as indifference. Yet beneath that silence there is often longing. A longing to be seen, understood, and met with tenderness. But longing can't be met if it's never expressed. Many women have been conditioned to equate silence with strength or maturity, to keep the peace, to rise above it, to not make things worse. But peace built on silence is not peace. It's suppression, and suppression always carries a cost. The unspoken becomes resentment. The unseen becomes loneliness. The untouched becomes ache. When emotional needs go unspoken for too long, a subtle numbness sets in. You stop expecting to be understood, so you stop trying to be. You move through conversations on the surface, avoiding depth because it feels risky. You tell yourself it's easier this way. But inside, a quiet grief grows. The grief of not being known. This is the essence of emotional disconnection. Two people together, yet miles apart, both longing for closeness, but too afraid or too exhausted to bridge the silence. And this silence doesn't only exist between partners, it exists within women themselves. It's the silence of ignoring your intuition, the silence of brushing off discomfort, the silence of pretending not to need what you desperately do. It's the inner voice that says, "Don't speak, don't rock the boat, don't be a burden." Over time, this inner censorship erodes authenticity. You start to forget what your true voice even sounds like. When we silence ourselves, we disconnect not only from others, but from our own inner truth. And that disconnection creates a kind of emotional drought. Without expression, emotion stagnates. Without communication, empathy withers. Without honesty, intimacy becomes impossible. Books like The Dance of Connection by Harriet Lerner remind us that honest communication isn't about confrontation. It's about connection. It's the courage to tell the truth about what we feel, even when our voice shakes. It's the willingness to stay open, even when vulnerability feels dangerous. It's the act of bridging the space between two hearts, again and again, even after misunderstanding. Silence also reinforces misunderstanding because it allows old narratives to go unchallenged. If a woman never speaks her truth, the people around her keep interacting with the version of her they imagine, not the one she actually is. They respond to assumptions, not authenticity. The relationship becomes a dance of illusion, each person performing roles rather than revealing realities. And in that performance, love loses its depth. Emotional disconnection grows not from lack of love, but from lack of communication. You can care deeply about someone and still feel unseen if you don't feel heard. You can live with someone for years and still feel lonely if your inner world remains unshared. Silence protects us from immediate discomfort, but it guarantees long-term distance. In intimate relationships, silence can become the quiet killer of desire. Arousal thrives on openness, curiosity, emotional safety. But when silence dominates, vulnerability disappears, and with it, the spark that keeps connection alive. A partner may sense the wall but not know how to reach across it. The body begins to mirror the emotional divide. Touch feels mechanical, intimacy feels empty, conversation feels rehearsed. And yet, breaking that silence is terrifying. It requires the courage to be misunderstood, the patience to listen, and the humility to admit fear. Many women stay silent not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They're afraid of losing love, so they hold back. But love cannot grow in the absence of truth. It needs air, voice, honesty, the same way the body needs breath. In the same way that chronic stress blocks arousal, chronic silence blocks connection. The throat and the pelvis are connected through the vagus nerve, two centers of expression and creation. When one is constricted, so is the other. A woman who cannot speak her truth often finds it hard to access her pleasure because both depend on openness. To free the body, she must first free her voice. There is a deep link between emotional expression and sexual vitality. When you silence one, you dull the other. When you begin to speak, even softly, you begin to thaw. Expression brings circulation, energetically, emotionally, physically. The moment a woman gives herself permission to say what she truly feels, her entire physiology responds. Her breath deepens, her muscles loosen, her energy expands. It's as if her body sighs with relief. Finally, truth. But this isn't about speaking just to speak. It's about honest, embodied communication, the kind that comes from presence, not performance. It's saying, I feel distant and I miss you, instead of pretending everything's fine. It's admitting, I'm afraid to open up, instead of waiting to be read. It's trusting that your truth, even if it's messy, is worth hearing, because it is. Silence often masquerades as strength, but real strength is in expression. Real strength is in showing your humanity. When you dare to speak what has been silent, you reclaim your power. You take your truth out of the shadows, where shame grows, and bring it into the light, where healing begins. In healing spaces, I've seen countless women find their voices again. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, sometimes with tears, sometimes with rage that's been buried for years. And every time what follows is release. A deep, trembling exhale as the body finally lets go of what it's been holding. Because silence doesn't just keep secrets, it keeps pain. The process of breaking silence often begins within. You start by listening to the parts of yourself you've ignored. The inner voice that says, I'm tired, I'm lonely, I want more, I deserve better. At first, these truths might feel uncomfortable, even rebellious. But they are the keys to authenticity. They are the sound of your aliveness returning. As women begin to speak their truth, to partners, to friends, to themselves, their relationships change. Not always easily, but deeply. Some connections deepen, others dissolve, but what remains is integrity, alignment, and self-respect. Because silence may keep peace, but it never keeps authenticity. When a woman finds her voice, she begins to see her value differently. She stops waiting for permission to be understood. She stops translating herself to be acceptable. She realizes that true intimacy can only exist where truth is spoken. And when she lives in that truth, her presence becomes magnetic. Because authenticity is the most attractive energy of all. On a societal level, women's silence has allowed generations of misunderstanding to persist, not only in relationships, but in medicine, media, and culture. Women's pain has been minimized, their pleasure misunderstood, their voices ignored. But every time one woman speaks honestly about her body, her needs, her experience, she chips away at that collective silence. She becomes a bridge for others to cross toward understanding. And here's what's most beautiful. When silence breaks, connection begins to heal almost immediately. Because beneath the layers of misunderstanding, the human heart always recognizes truth. It softens in its presence. Even difficult truths, when spoken with sincerity, create intimacy. It's not the absence of conflict that bonds people. It's the willingness to stay present through it. The antidote to silence isn't noise. It's truth. It's not about talking endlessly. It's about speaking from the heart. It's about replacing avoidance with honesty, pretending with presence, hiding with openness. To every woman who has stayed silent for too long, your voice matters. Your words carry medicine. Your truth has the power to reconnect you, to yourself, to love, to life. The moment you choose to speak, you begin to dismantle generations of conditioning that told you not to. You begin to reclaim your body, your pleasure, your aliveness. When silence breaks, energy moves. When energy moves, healing begins. And when healing begins, connection returns. So speak, not for validation, but for liberation. Speak because your truth deserves air. Speak because your voice is the bridge between misunderstanding and understanding, between distance and intimacy, between numbness and life. In the end, silence is not peace. Peace is what comes after the truth has been spoken, heard. The female body is designed with exquisite intelligence. Every system, every rhythm, every nerve pathway is interconnected in ways that most women are never taught to understand. At the core of arousal lies one essential truth. The body cannot open when it does not feel safe. Safety and relaxation are not luxuries in this process. They are the biological foundation of sexual awakening. Without them, desire can't take root, no matter how much love or effort surrounds it. When a woman feels safe, emotionally, physically, and energetically, her entire physiology begins to shift. Her breath deepens, her heart rate slows, her muscles soften. The nervous system moves from fight or flight to rest and receive. Blood flow increases to the genitals, the heart, and the skin. Hormones like oxytocin and dopamine begin to rise, creating feelings of connection, pleasure, and trust. These are not abstract emotions. They are measurable biological states that make arousal possible. The vagus nerve, a long wandering nerve that connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and pelvis, plays a key role in this process. It's the bridge between mind and body, between emotion and sensation. When a woman feels relaxed, the vagus nerve activates, signaling the body that it's safe to let go. This activation increases lubrication, enhances sensitivity, and allows orgasmic energy to move freely. But when stress or fear take over, the vagus nerve goes quiet, and the body closes down. This is why arousal cannot be forced. You can't think your way into pleasure, you can only feel your way there. The more you try to control it, the more elusive it becomes. The body doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to presence. It listens not to demands, but to the signals of safety, warmth, patience, attunement, and care. Safety doesn't mean perfection or control. It means feeling free to be as you are, in your body, in your emotions, in your imperfection. It means knowing that you won't be judged or rejected for what you feel or need. When a woman feels that kind of safety, her body naturally begins to awaken. The pelvic floor relaxes, the breath deepens, and sensation heightens. It's as though her body whispers, "Finally, I can exhale." This connection between safety and arousal is deeply rooted in the body's evolution. For thousands of years, the female nervous system has been wired to protect life, to sense danger, to guard, to survive. When the brain perceives threat, it shuts down reproductive and sensual functions because they're not essential for immediate survival. It's not that the body doesn't want pleasure. It simply prioritizes protection. Only when the body senses safety can it redirect energy toward connection, reproduction, and creativity. That's why stress, shame, and disconnection are such potent inhibitors of arousal. They trick the body into believing it's unsafe. Even subtle forms of tension, like self-criticism or fear of judgment, can send the same message to the nervous system: don't open. In this state, The body guards itself, not just emotionally but physically. Blood vessels constrict, muscles tighten, sensitivity diminishes. But when the opposite occurs, when trust replaces fear, the body transforms. This is the miracle of biology. Safety creates the chemistry of desire. When oxytocin rises, cortisol, the stress hormone, falls. When dopamine increases, pleasure becomes easier to access. When serotonin stabilizes, mood and confidence improve. These neurochemical shifts don't just make intimacy possible, they make it joyful, effortless, and alive. Relaxation, then, is not about doing nothing. It's about surrendering tension. It's about creating an inner environment where the body can feel, explore, and expand without pressure or fear. This might begin with breath. Deep, slow breathing is one of the most powerful tools for activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the system of rest, digestion, and arousal. Every exhale tells the body, "You are safe." Every gentle inhalation brings awareness back into the body, back into sensation. Touch, too, becomes a language of safety. When touch is given with presence, without agenda, it tells the body, "You can trust this." Over time, those messages begin to override years of conditioning that taught women to guard, perform, or please. The body starts to open not because it's supposed to, but because it wants to. Pleasure becomes an expression of trust, not a task to achieve. Even the smallest cues can signal safety or danger to the nervous system. The tone of a partner's voice, the rhythm of breath, the softness of lighting, the pace of movement, all these details speak directly to the body's subconscious. When those cues align with warmth and care, the body releases its guard. This is why emotional connection is so essential to sexual awakening. The body can't distinguish between emotional safety and physical safety. They are one and the same. In a culture obsessed with performance, women are often taught that arousal is about stimulation or technique. But true arousal begins long before physical touch. It begins in the nervous system. It begins in the space where you feel seen, understood, and unhurried. It begins when your body realizes it's finally allowed to rest. The irony is that many women don't even realize how much tension they carry. Years of stress, caregiving, and self-criticism create chronic contraction in the body, especially in the jaw, shoulders, abdomen, and pelvis. These areas mirror each other. A tight jaw often corresponds to a tight pelvic floor. A clenched abdomen mirrors a guarded heart. This is not coincidence. It's the body's architecture of defense. And until that tension begins to release, arousal cannot flow freely. One of the most powerful practices for reawakening this connection is somatic awareness. Learning to feel what's happening inside your body without judgment. When you start to notice subtle sensations, the warmth of your skin, the movement of your breath, the pulsing of your heart, you begin to rebuild trust with your own body. You stop treating it as an obstacle and start relating to it as an ally. This awareness alone can rewire the nervous system, teaching it that feeling is safe again. There's a beautiful passage in Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski that describes the dual control model of arousal. One part of the brain acts as the accelerator, turning desire on, while another acts as the brake, turning it off when danger is sensed. Most women don't have a problem with the accelerator, they have overactive brakes. The brakes are triggered by stress, fear, guilt, and insecurity. Relaxation doesn't just take the brakes off. It tells the brain there's no danger anymore. Only then can the accelerator do its job. What's profound about this is that safety and relaxation are not external gifts. They are internal states that can be cultivated. You can create them through self-awareness, breath, movement, and compassion. The more you practice feeling safe in your own body, the easier it becomes to feel safe with others. Arousal, then, becomes an extension of self-trust. Imagine this. A woman lies back, takes a deep breath, and feels her body soften for the first time in years. Not because someone told her to relax, but because she finally believes she can. She's not performing, she's not pretending. She's present. Her body begins to hum. Not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, awakening way, like a field after rain. That is the biology of safety in motion. That is the nervous system saying yes. This state of yes is not just physical, it's emotional, even spiritual. When a woman feels truly safe, her heart opens. Her pleasure becomes expansive, creative, generous. She is not just receiving touch, she is receiving life. Her awareness widens. Her senses sharpen. Her spirit feels grounded and free. This is not indulgence, it's embodiment. It's the body's natural state when it's no longer defending itself. This is why mindfulness practices, meditation, and even gentle yoga can have such profound effects on sexual well-being. They train the nervous system to stay in the parasympathetic state, where arousal thrives. They increase vagal tone, improve circulation, balance hormones, and cultivate emotional regulation. But perhaps most importantly, they teach the body what safety feels like, not as an idea, but as a felt experience. Safety is also deeply relational. A woman's body opens most easily in the presence of attunement, when her partner listens not just with ears but with energy, when there's patience, gentleness, and responsiveness. The body interprets those signals as safety. This is not about dependency, it's about co-regulation. Just as two hearts sync when they're close, two nervous systems can harmonize through care. A relaxed body invites relaxation in another. In many ways, sexual awakening is not about adding anything new. It's about removing what blocks the body's natural intelligence. The body already knows how to open, how to feel, how to receive. It simply needs to remember, and that memory is stored beneath the layers of tension, fear, and overthinking. When those layers begin to dissolve, pleasure emerges on its own. Relaxation and safety are not passive states, they're active trust. To relax into pleasure is to surrender control, to allow the unknown, to believe that you will be held. That is not weakness, it's courage. It takes immense strength to let go of vigilance and choose vulnerability. But that vulnerability is the gateway to aliveness. So the next time you think about arousal, don't start with desire, start with safety. Ask yourself, does my body feel safe right now? Does it feel seen, heard, respected? If the answer is no, slow down. Breathe. Soften. Give yourself the safety that your body is asking for. Because until the body feels safe, it will not open. And when it does, when relaxation and safety finally meet, the awakening that follows is not just sexual. Emotional, spiritual, creative. It's the return of energy that was once locked away. It's the body remembering that pleasure is not something you earn. It's something you are designed for. Arousal is not the spark of excitement alone. It's the quiet hum of life when the body feels safe enough to feel again. It's the moment when defense melts into trust, when tension turns into flow, when survival gives way to sensation. This is what it means to be fully alive. To let your biology, your emotions, and your soul exist in harmony. When a woman reaches that place, she no longer chases pleasure. She embodies it. Every breath, every movement, every heartbeat becomes an expression of safety and aliveness intertwined. And from that space, intimacy becomes effortless, love becomes deeper, and life itself feels richer, because the body at last is no longer guarding, but glowing. The moment a woman begins to communicate her truth, honestly, vulnerably, without apology, something inside her body starts to shift. The silence that once numbed her begins to dissolve, and in its place rises awareness. Communication and self-awareness are not just emotional skills. They are physiological acts of liberation. They calm the nervous system, restore connection, and reopen the pathways that pleasure depends on. When a woman silences herself, when she hides her needs, suppresses her desires, or pretends to be satisfied, her body listens. It learns that it is not safe to express or feel. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, sensitivity fades. But when she speaks, when she allows her voice to carry truth through her body, the opposite happens. Her chest opens, her breath deepens, and her nervous system begins to trust again. This is not just psychological, it's biological. Expression literally changes the chemistry of the body. The act of naming what you feel, what you want, or what you fear activates parts of the brain associated with regulation and empathy. Neuroscientists call this affect labeling. When you put your inner experience into words, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, calms down. Cortisol decreases. The body exits survival mode. The moment you give language to your truth, You create internal safety, and safety is the first step toward pleasure. But communication is more than words. It's presence. It's the tone of voice, the openness of body language, the willingness to be seen. When communication is honest but gentle, assertive but kind, it invites connection rather than defense. In relationships, this is the bridge that carries desire from one nervous system to another, because arousal doesn't thrive in performance. It thrives in authenticity. Many women were never taught to name their pleasure, let alone their pain. They were taught to be pleasing, not to express desire, to be quiet, not curious, to avoid conflict, not to seek clarity. That conditioning runs deep, and it lives in the body as tension, shame, and disconnection. Every time a woman denies her own needs, her body contracts a little more. Every time she speaks a truth, no matter how small, her body softens. Communication is how the body learns to trust its own voice again. Self-awareness is where this process begins. You cannot communicate what you cannot feel. To restore pleasure, a woman must first become fluent in her own inner language, sensations, emotions, and instincts. She must learn to ask herself, what do I feel right now? Where do I feel it in my body? Is it pleasure or pressure? Is it openness or resistance? The answers don't need to be perfect. They just need to be honest. Awareness is not about fixing. It's about listening. In this sense, self-awareness becomes an act of self-intimacy. It's a way of turning inward with curiosity instead of criticism. When a woman begins to listen to her body, its aches, its pulses, its whispers, she stops treating it as an object to control and starts relating to it as a partner in communication. The body always speaks, but most women have been trained to ignore it. Awareness restores that conversation. When awareness deepens, a woman begins to notice patterns. How stress shuts her down, how kindness opens her up, how breath changes her sensitivity. She learns that pleasure doesn't come from outside. It arises from inside when the conditions are right. And those conditions are shaped by communication, both internal and external. Imagine this. A woman lies beside her partner, feeling distant and disconnected. For years she's gone along, saying she's fine, saying she's tired, saying it's okay. But tonight something different happens. She places a hand on her chest, feels her heart racing, and whispers, "I feel far away. I want to feel close, but I don't know how." That single sentence, soft, honest, imperfect, changes everything. The air shifts. Her partner turns toward her. Connection begins to rebuild. That's the power of communication. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It just has to be real. This is where emotional safety and physical pleasure intertwine. Communication builds safety. Safety enables relaxation. Relaxation allows arousal. They're not separate experiences. They're one continuum. Every time a woman communicates her truth, she sends a message to her nervous system. You're allowed to feel. That permission is the soil from which pleasure grows. There's also a profound link between the throat and the pelvis. In many somatic traditions, these two areas are considered mirrors of each other. When the throat is tight, the pelvis often is too. When the voice is free, so is the body. This is not just symbolic. It's anatomical. Both regions are rich in vagal nerve pathways. Both respond to emotional stress, and both open through breath and sound. That's why moaning, sighing, laughing, even singing, these are not random reactions to pleasure. They're expressions of freedom. When a woman silences herself, she constricts her pleasure. When she speaks her truth, she liberates it. The act of voicing desire is, in itself, arousing. Not because of what is said, but because of the energy it releases. It's the nervous system recognizing authenticity as safety. Self-awareness also transforms how a woman receives pleasure. Instead of performing or trying to get there, she learns to stay connected to what she feels moment by moment. She notices when something feels good, when it doesn't, when her body needs more or less. This sensitivity is intelligence. It's feedback. And when she communicates that feedback with clarity, connection deepens. Partners often underestimate how powerful this communication can be. A simple slower, softer, or stay right there can turn a mechanical act into an intimate dialogue. It's not about control. It's about participation. Pleasure becomes co-created, not given or taken. When both partners listen, not just with ears but with presence, they create a rhythm of attunement. This rhythm is what turns physical contact into emotional communion. But communication isn't only about what happens between partners. It's also the way we speak to ourselves. The inner dialogue we carry shapes our body's capacity for pleasure. When a woman constantly criticizes her body, its size, its shape, its perceived flaws, she reinforces disconnection. Her body cannot relax under the weight of self-judgment. But when she begins to speak to herself with tenderness, "I'm here. I'm listening. You're safe," her body begins to believe her. The nervous system responds to kindness the same way it responds to touch. This is why mindfulness and body-based therapy are such powerful tools for restoring pleasure. They teach awareness of sensations without judgment. They help the mind become a compassionate observer rather than a critic. And as awareness grows, so does trust. The woman who once dissociated from her body begins to inhabit it again. She feels the aliveness beneath her skin, the warmth in her chest, the subtle hum of energy that was always there, waiting. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk describes how trauma is stored in the body and how awareness through movement, breath, and expression can help release it. This principle applies equally to sexual healing. Communication is not only verbal, it's somatic. It's the body communicating through movement, breath, sound, and touch. When these channels open, pleasure follows naturally. It's important to understand that communication and self-awareness don't always feel comfortable at first. For many women, speaking up about desire or boundaries triggers old fears. Fear of rejection, fear of being too much, fear of conflict. But those fears are not signs to stop. They are signs that something real is waking up. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to stay open in its presence. Each time a woman speaks her truth, she strengthens the muscle of self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of pleasure. You cannot surrender into pleasure if you don't trust yourself to speak up when something doesn't feel right. Communication creates the boundaries that make surrender possible. It's paradoxical, but true. The stronger your boundaries, the deeper your capacity for release. As awareness expands, communication becomes less about fixing and more about sharing. This is how I feel right now. This is what my body needs. This is what helps me open. These are not demands. They're invitations. Invitations for connection, for curiosity, for co-creation. The more transparent this exchange becomes, the more effortless pleasure feels. Arousal is, at its essence, a dialogue between body and mind, between self and other. Silence breaks that dialogue. Communication restores it. Awareness deepens it. Pleasure flourishes in that dialogue. When the body feels heard, when the emotions feel respected, when the mind stops trying to control and starts allowing. This is the art of embodied communication, speaking and listening, giving and receiving, expressing and sensing. When done consciously, becomes a form of foreplay that extends far beyond the physical. It builds anticipation, emotional resonance, and mutual safety, all of which prime the nervous system for arousal. The more self-aware a woman becomes, the more she realizes that pleasure isn't linear. It's rhythmic. It ebbs and flows, expands and contracts, like breath. Communication allows her to move with those rhythms rather than resist them. She learns that arousal isn't lost when it fades. It's just shifting, waiting for the next wave. True pleasure is not about intensity. It's about authenticity. It's about feeling connected to yourself and to another human being in the most present, alive way possible. Communication and awareness are the tools that make that connection possible. They bring the mind out of anxiety and into sensation. They turn confusion into clarity, disconnection into intimacy, silence into resonance. So when we speak about restoring pleasure, we are really talking about restoring communication between thoughts and feelings, between hearts and bodies, between souls that want to be seen. Every time you choose to speak truth instead of staying silent, every time you choose to listen instead of assuming, every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you bring your body closer to pleasure. Pleasure isn't something you chase. It's something you uncover by removing the layers that block it. Communication and self-awareness are the tools that peel those layers away. They reconnect you to the truth that your body already knows how to feel, how to love, how to awaken. In the end, pleasure is not a destination. It's a conversation. Between breath and heartbeat, between body and soul, And every time you communicate with honesty and awareness, you join that conversation fully, as both participant and witness, as both lover and beloved. That is where true aliveness begins. Reclaiming arousal is often misunderstood. In a world that has long equated female desire with frivolity, danger, or indulgence, the very act of claiming one's own pleasure can feel taboo, yet nothing could be further from the truth. Reclaiming arousal is not an indulgence, it is an act of healing. It is a statement to the body, the mind, and the spirit that your life, your energy, and your sensations matter. Healing begins where denial ends. For too long, women have been taught to put themselves last, to prioritize others' comfort over their own aliveness. Stress, shame, and silence have created a culture where women disconnect from their own bodies, as though pleasure were a luxury, rather than a fundamental expression of being alive. To reclaim arousal is to reverse that pattern. It is a radical form of self-respect. When a woman reconnects with her desire, she is restoring communication with her own nervous system. She is signaling to her body, I am safe. I am worthy. I am allowed to feel. Every pulse of blood, every surge of warmth, every subtle shift in sensation becomes a teacher, a guide back to presence. This is not indulgence. It is rewiring the body and mind to remember what was always natural. That feeling pleasure is a healthy, vital, and necessary part of life. Arousal is intimately connected with the body's healing systems. When the nervous system is allowed to relax into sensation, stress hormones decrease, blood flow increases, and the body moves toward homeostasis. Orgasm, for example, is not simply a physical release. It is a neurochemical reset. Oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, all the chemicals associated with pleasure, work together to soothe the nervous system, regulate mood, and enhance emotional resilience. In this sense, arousal is medicine. It's a therapeutic process that restores balance to body and brain. Reclaiming arousal also restores a sense of ownership over the self. When a woman has been conditioned to prioritize others or to hide her desire, she loses touch with her autonomy. Her body becomes a space of performance, obligation, or avoidance. Rediscovering what brings pleasure is a reclaiming of agency. It is saying, I am here. I belong in my own body. I can feel. I can want. I can receive. That sense of authority over one's own experience is profoundly healing. The act of reclaiming desire often requires confronting old wounds. Shame, trauma, past disappointments, they all surface when a woman begins to explore arousal intentionally. But this confrontation is part of the healing. Every time she meets a memory with awareness instead of suppression, she softens the nervous system's response. Every time she allows herself to feel without judgment, she reprograms old patterns that once said, pleasure is dangerous. Healing is the courage to feel fully, even when the body and mind resist. Culturally, women have been taught that arousal is transactional, performative, or shameful. These messages reinforce disconnection, leaving women feeling that desire is a vice rather than a virtue. Reclaiming arousal is a reclamation of truth, that the body is a source of wisdom, energy, and vitality. Pleasure is not selfish, it is restorative. It is a reminder that you are alive, that you matter, and that your sensations are meaningful. Reclaiming arousal is also an act of grief work. Many women have lost touch with pleasure through experiences of judgment, rejection, or trauma. Rediscovering desire is a form of mourning for what was lost and a celebration of what can be regained. It is a tender, sometimes difficult, but ultimately transformative process. Every moment of conscious arousal is a moment of reconciliation between body, mind, and soul. Self-awareness plays a crucial role in this healing. When a woman notices what brings her joy, what sparks sensation, what feels safe, she is actively participating in her own recovery. This awareness is a mirror. It reflects back the truth that her body is a home, not a battleground. Through observation, exploration, and gentle experimentation, arousal becomes a path toward wholeness rather than indulgence. Communication, both internal and external, reinforces this process. Sharing desires with a partner, expressing boundaries, or even speaking to oneself about what feels good, all signal to the nervous system that arousal is safe. Trust is built through these small but consistent acts. The body begins to recognize pleasure as a reward, not a threat. Over time, these patterns replace tension, shame, and avoidance with openness, confidence, and vitality. Healing through arousal also reconnects women with creativity and life force. Desire is not only sexual, it is a vital energy that flows into all areas of being. When women suppress arousal, that energy stagnates. When they reclaim it, it moves into expression, play, art, connection, and intuition. Pleasure becomes a conduit through which life energy circulates freely. In this way, reclaiming arousal is not escapism. It is reclamation of the full spectrum of aliveness. It's essential to understand that this is not a quick fix. Healing through arousal is layered, gradual, and requires patience. Some days may feel blocked, numb, or resistant. Others may bring waves of intensity and rediscovery. This variability is natural. The nervous system is recalibrating. The body is learning that it can be safe and still feel, that it can be present and still receive. Every sensation, every heartbeat, every breath contributes to the reconstruction of trust. Reclaiming arousal also reframes intimacy. When women reconnect with their own desire, they bring that presence into relationships. They are no longer performing or responding out of obligation. They are participating with authenticity. Connection deepens because it is mutual, energetic, and alive. Pleasure becomes a shared celebration rather than a duty or expectation. Healing, therefore, is not isolated. It radiates outward, transforming bonds with others. Another critical aspect is the reclaiming of time and attention. In modern life, women are often pulled in countless directions: work, family, social obligations, while their own sensations are neglected. To engage in arousal intentionally is to honor one's body as a priority. It is to say, my presence in my own life matters. This reprioritization is healing in itself, countering patterns of neglect, invisibility, and self-erasure. It is also worth noting that reclaiming arousal can be an antidote to stress and chronic tension. Sexual energy and nervous system regulation are deeply intertwined. When women allow themselves to feel pleasure, cortisol levels decrease, blood flow improves, and the body moves from fight or flight into rest and receive mode. In essence, reclaiming arousal is a direct pathway to restoring physical, mental, and emotional health. Many women find that the act of reclaiming desire awakens parts of themselves that have been dormant for years. Curiosity, courage, joy, and confidence often emerge spontaneously. These qualities are not byproducts of indulgence. They are markers of healing. Pleasure, when approached consciously, restores the body's integrity, the mind's clarity, and the soul's vitality. Reclaiming arousal also creates a dialogue with past experiences. Each moment of sensation can illuminate old patterns, what was once associated with shame, fear, or avoidance, and give the woman the chance to rewrite those narratives. Pleasure becomes not only a reclaiming of the present but a reclamation of the past, a gentle rewriting of the story of self, from restriction to expansiveness. Ultimately, healing through arousal is a reclaiming of sovereignty. It is a declaration that a woman owns her body, her energy, and her experience. She is not defined by what others approve or disapprove of, nor by societal myths that diminish desire. She is defined by her ability to inhabit herself fully, to trust her sensations, and to allow pleasure to be a guide rather than a guilt-laden indulgence.